why sometimes your best friend's advice sort of sucks, and when you should go to see a psychologist instead. Hi, my name is Luke Vu, PhD. I'm a clinical psychologist. Disclaimer, I'm not your psych. This isn't treatment. And if you need a psychologist, please find a registered qualified psychologist in your area/country. I think there are two major factors why a psychologist's advice is more valuable than your friend's advice. The first is objectivity. I think we take for granted that almost all the advice we receive from our friends and family is colored by our relationship to them. Your best friend, every person has their own goals and their own desires. And even though they might wish you the best, they don't have any ill intent or malice towards you, it's hard for them to be genuinely objective. Now, for example, and I see this in clinical practice all the time, if you've got a substance use problem, a gambling problem, a drinking problem, well, and you're doing that with your friends and you have like a close circle of friends that you do that stuff together, well, asking your friends if you have a problem isn't going to be a straightforward question for them to answer. Alternate perspective. Now, having a fresh perspective can be really important. Sometimes we need a point of view from someone who isn't entangled in the same norms, same expectations, and same assumptions as your circle of friends. And there's so many examples of this. Now, you could be coming from a toxic family environment. You could have strong, very cultural or group norms about careers, or gender, stereotype beliefs, non-acceptance of some of your own life choices. And all these biases will make it really difficult for you to hear objective, alternative, fresh solutions to your problem. So what are some advantages of going to a mental health professional rather than going to a best friend? Now, the first is your friends aren't really accountable for what happens next. Your best friend's advice could be good, it could be bad, and then they're not accountable for it, but your psychologist is. If their clinical advice results in a poor outcome for you, well, it's their job to hit the books and figure out a way. How do they improve your symptoms? How do you get less anxiety? How do you improve your mood? And that's something that you can't expect from your friend. It's just not fair. You can't call up your buddy and say, hey, you gave me really crappy advice.
I immediately regret this decision.
Your friends don't know what advice is appropriate and effective. And it's not really fair for them to know. They don't know, they don't have the access to the studies, the scientists, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the team of researchers trying to figure out what the best tool for that particular problem is. And so it's unlikely, just by sheer chance, that they're going to recommend something that's going to be the right thing for you at that time. Your friends aren't really there to fix you. They're there for mutual, reciprocal, emotional support. And if you have that expectation of them, it can actually strain the relationship. Empathy fatigue can start to set in, and then they can become resentful. And that's something that you want to avoid in a relationship. It can be challenging for friends to unhear something. Despite what your friend says, they're always going to be influenced by what you say. Do you really want to share your drug relapse, your porn addiction, or your affair? Is that something that your friend can unhear? The benefit of going to a psychologist is that you can work on your issues, take your time, sort them out. And once it's done, you can walk away knowing that it won't ever come up and influence your social circles. So what are some basic tools that therapists are equipped with that your best friend doesn't have? So the first is a risk-benefit analysis. A psychologist has years of training evaluating what the right tools, strategies, and skills are going to be useful for a particular situation. Now, for example, if you had a fear of swimming, your best friend's advice could be, hey, you don't have to swim. Unbeknownst to you, that might actually increase your anxiety for swimming. It might actually make the problem worse. Now, the opposite, your friend could say, hey, just dive straight in. Again, could actually make the problem worse. You could re-traumatize yourself and then increase the severity of your anxiety. This is something a skilled clinician has to calculate and work out. Where are you in treatment so that the right tool is going to work? Is it incremental exposure, or is it going to be like a fear attack? Is it going to be flooding? And the devil's in the details, and this is why you go to a professional. Being non-judgmental. Psychologists are trained to actively manage their biases and staying objective even when the most challenging stigmas or biases or prejudices arise. And this could be working with drug problems, pornography, deviant sexual behaviors, or extreme or deviant thoughts. And that's something that your friend might not actually have the skills to do. Actively listening. Psychologists are trained to ask questions to help you elaborate and explore why you do the things that you do, and to avoid leading questions that keep you locked to certain outcomes. Functional analysis. Psychologists look for patterns of behavior and their function. How is it serving you in the short term and in the long term? Because everything you do has a reason, subconsciously or consciously. And trying to really understand it, it's going to help you figure out why you did those things in the first place. And the last is cognitive analysis. Throughout therapy, psychologists will look for the underlying beliefs, your ingrained thoughts that help direct your decisions and behaviors. So psychologists can help figure out which beliefs are yours and which of those decisions and behaviors are led by some of your parents' belief, by things that you picked up directly or indirectly throughout your life. When is it okay to go to a friend for advice and when is it not? So your friend might recommend or advise something that is actually beyond their capability, but the emotional support that they provide is really, really important. This means being emotionally present and available, sharing a meal, or just hanging out with someone that genuinely cares about you. You don't want to do these things with your psychologist, and it wouldn't be that helpful. You want to be able to generate positive emotion with someone who cares about you and that you care about. And that's important because that helps you feel that you're thriving and have that sense of belonging. You aren't thriving in the clinic room. Life happens outside the clinic room. When should we listen to our friend's advice? There's no straight answer for this, and it's usually a case-by-case basis. There are a couple of questions to think about to make your own judgment whether or not you should follow your friend's advice. Did it add to the problem in the short and long term? Do they lack relevant experience in the problem area? Do their suggested solutions violate your own moral and ethical code? Are they contributors to the problem and part of the issue? If the answer is yes to one or more of those questions, then you should probably think twice about their advice. Your role as a friend is not to fix your friend's problems. You function far better as someone who can listen, really listen. Spend time with that person and give them the space to share their thoughts and make them feel supported. And if you really feel that you have a good solution, you can share that after weighing the pros and cons as something for them to consider. The most important thing you can do is to validate your friend's experiences, to celebrate your friend's successes, and to encourage them when they experience setbacks. So that way you can be a friend that supports that person through the short and the long term. Hope this helped you understand the difference between your best friend's advice and a psychologist. If you found this useful, hit subscribe. I'm Luke Vu. Be kind, be you. Catch you next time.